Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. My name is Bruce Vandell, and I will be hosting today's webinar on work-based learning. I am supporting the work with the high impact practices across the University System of Georgia as a consultant, and it is indeed my pleasure to be with you today and to be working on this really exciting project. I want to thank you all for being with us today for what is our fourth and final workshop this spring on high impact practices. For those of you who have been with us at our previous webinars, welcome back. If you're here for the first time, welcome. This, of course, is part of our larger HIPS implementation team project that we've been coordinating with Leap State, Georgia, who has been a tremendous partner and has been critical to pulling together all these workshops. So I want to personally thank Brian Etheridge for today's webinar and then LSG in general for their partnership throughout this project. So Denise, if you could maybe go ahead and upload or share our PowerPoint slides, we can go ahead and get started today. Before we get started, first of all, I want to say send regrets from Robert Todd, who was not able to join us today, but he is thinking about us and of course has been a tremendous leader with this project and will be of course working with us moving forward as we move into the next steps of this project. So go ahead if you want to advance the slide today. Before we get started, I did want to share just one piece of information for those of you who are part of the HIPS implementation team. We've made a bit of an adjustment in our schedule in terms of the next steps. So after today, the next meaningful milestone for the project will be to submit your institution's appendix, as we've been calling it, to your momentum plan. If you are part of the HIPS implementation team, you should have received fairly detailed information about what we're looking for. The change we have is to shift the date back to the end of May. Now it was May 14th, we've shifted it back to May 31st to give you more time to prepare your plans. And as we've mentioned in our previous communications and our previous workshops, this is not intended to be a voluminous report on your experiences with this project, but merely, honestly, a set of bullet points of what your observations have been based on sitting through these workshops and in interacting with your colleagues as fellow implementation team members about sort of the state of play around high impact practices at your institution. Some thoughts and ideas about what you could be doing at your institution moving forward and recommendations that you can make to your momentum plan team about how to more effectively incorporate HIPS into your momentum plan. And then to share that with your provost and also with us at USG so that we can get a documentation of what your plan or what you're recommending to your institution and how HIPS can be more effectively integrated into your momentum approach. So in the coming weeks, we want to make ourselves available to you if you have questions about pulling together your appendix, any kind of additional resources that you might need, support you might need, greater technical assistance around any particular HIP that you're interested in exploring more deeply. Do not hesitate to reach out to Robert or myself, and we can do our best to get you all the information you might need or answer any questions you might have to help you submit those appendices for your momentum plan. So again, May 31st, we'll send out a communication after today to all your HIPS implementation team members so that they're aware of that change in date. Go ahead and advance the slide. So let's move into today's workshop. So we have presentations from 3 of USG institutions that are doing tremendous work in work-based learning. From our survey of HIPS implementation team members, this was, I think, one of the highest rated and requested topics for us to focus on. So we are glad to be able to provide you the opportunity to learn more about some outstanding work happening across the state of Georgia in this space. And so what we're going to do is hear 3 presentations. First of all, from Krista Fry from Kennesaw State University. She's the Director of Career Advising and Planning for the Department of Career Planning and Development at Kennesaw State. Unfortunately, Trish is not able to join us today, so apologies for that. And then we'll shift it over to Laura Garcia, the Director of Career Education at the Georgia Tech Career Center at Georgia Tech. And then we'll follow up with a presentation from Mark Reeves and David Newton from the University of West Georgia. Mark's a Senior Associate Vice President for Auxiliary Services, and David is at the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies. Directions for you as observers today is to keep yourself on mute throughout the presentations. We will have time for questions and answers after the last presentation. Please do not hesitate, however, to use the chat function throughout. I'm going to encourage our presenters, when you're not presenting, to check the chat box and feel free to provide responses via the chat, but we will also, like I said, provide time for questions and answers at the end of the third presentation. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Krista for our first presentation today.
Perfect. Thank you, Bruce, so much. I'm so excited to be with you all today, to be, albeit virtual, in a space with so many bright minds and transformative leaders across our state. So just really thrilled to be here today and talk to you a little bit about how KSU is exploring increasing engagement through some high impact practices, specifically with internships and co-ops, which we'll focus on today. So next slide. Perfect. As Bruce mentioned, my name is Krista Fry. I am the Director of Career Advising and Planning here in our Department of Career Planning and Development at KSU. I also work with a team of career and internship advisors and assistant directors as a liaison for our academic colleges to assist them in really all of their endeavors with internships and co-ops. So, getting them acquainted with the community, with employers that their students may be seeking out for those internship opportunities, but also, sharing some best practices from our field of career services for internship involvement. Tris, I know he is so sad he was not able to be with us today, but he has played such a huge component in our It's About Engagement initiative, which we'll talk about. So I've shared his contact information in a further slide. So feel free to reach out to either of us if you all have any questions or want some of the resources that we'll share today. Perfect. So our overview. So we'll talk about what It's About Engagement is, what that means for KSU, what we're working to build at KSU, and creating definitions, and what that looks like through the taxonomies that we've created. And then I want to share some examples of faculty that have really done it really well. And hopefully, provide them as a resource for you all should you need any examples or have any questions about how this is working in practice. And then share some resources that we have at KSU for our faculty, just to get your wheels turning of what you could do at your institutions. So It's About Engagement is our quality enhancement plan. We wanted it to focus on high impact practices. So throughout a cycle of proposals being submitted of what our university thought would be the most impactful for our students, we've decided to really refine it to 3 pillars of service learning, research, and internships and co-ops. So it's branded It's About Engagement because we really want to increase not only our student engagement in these 3 pillars, and we'll talk about internships and co-ops today, but also course offerings. So, allowing students to have more opportunities to engage in this type of activity in their courses, and then really kind of narrow down what the student learning outcomes are from these high impact practices that we are creating at KSU. Our quality enhancement plan also allows faculty to receive professional development funds. So a lot of those funds are awarded through our faculty learning communities. We have course redesign institutes for each one of the pillars of our QEP, and then also a team of faculty that really assist us in looking at those reflection assessments and determining what those student learning outcomes are. Slide, please. Perfect. So at KSU, prior to our QEP, the definition of internships and co-ops, we had them occurring at our institution in various academic departments and colleges, but there was no sort of streamlined language of what those internship courses or experiences in themselves should include, how they should be structured, and really no quality measure necessarily. It was really up to each academic department and college, which of course had its pros and sometimes areas of improvement. So through the QEP, we did some research and created definitions that would help faculty, students, community partners to really understand what we say when we mean, or what we mean when we say internships, co-ops, or field experience. We got a lot of this information from, experts in the field, but also from our partners at the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE. So each of the internships and co-ops in and of themselves need to have these 8 defining characteristics of high impact practices. They really need to be focusing on, creating that extension from the classroom into the work environment. So, these students are really should be working on aspects of positions that are really taking what they're learning in the classroom and applying it in a real world setting. So no grabbing coffee, no running copies, very minimal tasks like that, but ones that are really focused on enriching that classroom experience in a real world setting. So our department chairs play a pretty large role in determining if those internship or co-op courses fit within the It's About Engagement or QEP. And so they have really, looked at the courses, looked at the syllabi to ensure that that those courses do meet those definitions, and that they're really pursuing and really pushing students to think about their internships differently, and really thinking about them within these 8 characteristics. So in addition to that definition, we created a taxonomy. This taxonomy, and we've linked them all on these slides, as I'm sure will be shared with you later, but the taxonomy really allows the faculty to see, okay, I have students that are participating in internships, but within my course setting, what are some key components of my course that I can integrate in order to make it count, I guess, towards the QEP. And so we used a taxonomy based on some research and some other institutions that have done really well, and developed columns for like high impact, higher impact, and highest. So, faculty have that range that they can, perform highest in some areas of the taxonomy, but then, feel free to perform in the high impact practice area, because we know based on research that those are just as developmental and impactful to students. So some of the taxonomy, really focuses on making sure that students are in internships and co-ops, that they're gaining those skills and knowledge in the professional environment that are going to help them to be successful later. We also want to allow them to experience navigating those professional environments and social and organizational cultures, and really reflecting on that in the classroom, and reflecting on how their program has helped them prepare for these internship experiences and how it can continue to help them prepare. And then, assessment for the ongoing growth of the student, creating reflection points throughout the semester that allow those students to reflect on the learning and the experiences that they're gaining in those internships. And then obviously a lot of our taxonomy and the reason behind our QEP was absolutely grounded in Ku's work. So how do we assess it? How do we decide how successful we've been? So a part of our QEP, we do have an assessment plan, and faculty will submit their student reflections. So within the course, any moments of where they are having their students reflect on their experiences, all of those reflections are compiled, and this is Triss's main expertise area, but they're compiled and they're evaluated by a team of assessment evaluators that have been trained based on a rubric, and that again is part of our professional development fund for faculty. But they really reflect on whether the QEP overall and in general is assisting our students in learning. So, these reflections don't reflect directly on faculty. A lot of that information is redacted. We want to make sure that it's not pinpointing one specific department or faculty member, but the the general sense overall is to just ensure that students are learning. So some examples of high impact practices in the internship or co-op space. If you want to go to the next slide, Dr. Lara Smith-Sitton is a really fine example of this. She is the internship faculty coordinator for English. So you'll see listed here on the slides things like level of expertise, opportunities for students to develop or to document their experience. Those are components of our taxonomy. So what I want to do with these two examples I'm going to share with you is kind of walk you through bits of our taxonomy to show you how our faculty are meeting those standards. They're meeting that taxonomy. So Lara has a wealth of experience in the industry and in English and both professional writing. She has published work regarding experiential education and work-based learning, and that really helps to make her internship classes more enriching. She also has opportunities for students to reflect on their learning at multiple points throughout their semester with her via journal entries. And so, journal entries that are uploaded to D2L and those opportunities to share. As you can imagine, internships and co-ops require quite a bit of work and community building with our external partners, our site hosts. And Lara does a really fantastic job of building deep relationships with those folks. She often serves as a resource to her students of, if a student comes to her and they're looking for an internship, she has, a list of community partners that she's developed great relationships with that she can refer those students to. There is a critical reflection component incorporated into her course, as well as an end of semester evaluation. And we know based on research, and we've included it in our taxonomy, that those pieces are also critical. So not only, reflection and feedback throughout the course, but definitely at the end to have a culminating experience for students to reflect. Lara is frequently, thinking about how to improve the internship experience for her students and create more robust experiences for her students. So she is definitely someone that we tend to look to and push, newer faculty to that are coming into the internship space. And then Dawn is with our College of Computing and Software Engineering, and Dawn has also been such a fantastic resource for our faculty at KSU in the internship space. Sometimes I just wonder how Dawn does it all. She is a great site partner, so she really works to engage the community of employers that want to employ our students from our College of Computing and Software Engineering. Throughout her course, she provides 8 assignments for her students to update her on the status of their internships and their experience, and really for them to reflect and talk about what they're learning and how it's relating to their classroom. She has, like I said, developed really fantastic relationships with her employer partners in the field. A lot of that does come from her industry expertise. She did come from industry, and really works to keep those connections alive and well for the benefit of her students. She hosts an internship networking night every semester and in collaboration with our office, and brings in employers from all across the state to work with students and to let them know about their internship opportunities, and to allow those students to network. And these are students that, anywhere from first year students all the way to, we even have some alumni that want to come back and kind of learn about those opportunities. But she does a really great job at creating opportunities for employers to speak with our students and for students to get that experience in networking with them as well. Dawn also includes, those critical reflection components in her courses. And she also has them create a final assignment at the end of the course that really allows them to display their full experience that they've had, and really share with their classmates. And we found that peer sharing has really push students to apply for more internships, and to get more involved in internships because they've then seen their peers do it. So Dawn runs a really fantastic internship course for those computing students. So part of the QEP is, obviously increasing engagement, increasing opportunities for engagement in those internship courses. So a lot of that has just been us assisting faculty and being resources for them and whatever questions they have about getting involved more in the internship space, or creating more courses that are, really building on those internship opportunities. So we have faculty learning communities that allow faculty to get together interdisciplinarily and work with each other and learn about those best practices from each other. And I've seen such great conversations come out of that. And so that is something that we're really proud of. We have our Center for Teaching and Learning as well that serve as really fantastic resources. That's Triss's area. And helping faculty to understand how to incorporate that taxonomy into their learning objectives, and into their syllabi. We obviously have our QEP site where it is serving as a resource hub for faculty. So they always have access to definitions and taxonomies and, best practices and resources from us. And then our department, career planning and development, serves as a resource to them too. So especially when we're speaking about the administrative portions of internships and co-ops, so vetting sites, ensuring students get registered for their correct academic classes, that's a large part in what our department assists with. And then again, I think the funding has been a really helpful component, allowing faculty to receive stipends and things for attending these course redesign institutes that are week-long intensive institutes, allowing faculty to dissect their courses and determine if they want to improve them, and what tweaks they can make. So those are all of the slides that I had, all the information I had for you today regarding KSU internships, and co-ops, and really kind of diving into It's About Engagement QEP. And now I think I'm going to turn it over to Laura from Georgia Tech.
All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you all are having a wonderful Friday. We have some beautiful weather outside. You can't see my window over here. But I'm Laura Garcia. I'm the Director of Career Education at the Georgia Tech Career Center. In full disclosure, I am helping to present on behalf of my colleague, who's the Director of Co-ops and Internships. So I'm actually going to drop her information into the chat. Depending on how specific the question may be, I may need to redirect you to her just to get that data directly on hand. So to kick off the conversation, wanted to share just a little bit of information about Georgia Tech. So if you know anything about the Institute, there's definitely a culture of co-op, culture of internship. It's something that's really been built up over time. So a couple of fast facts. So our co-op program is an accredited program that has been in existence for well over 100 years. So definitely has been embedded into kind of the culture and expectation of our students that experience is needed. So for co-op, students will alternate between full-time study and coursework. So it's at least 3 semesters of full-time paid work with the same employer, and it follows a school work sort of pattern. Many times there's confusion from students thinking, oh, well, if I do a co-op program, this is going to put back me a year. And in many cases, at most, it may be a semester, but we find many of our students, will take summer courses. So that can actually still keep you within that 4-year bracket. For our co-ops, the experience must be major related. These students will register for non-credit bearing 12 audit hour courses for each rotation. One special aspect of this, if students complete the program, they do receive that co-op designation on their diploma. And what we found with our co-op program is by having this particular program, we have strong alumni support and have accumulated a lot of endowments, which have resulted in scholarships for students who are interested in pursuing these opportunities. For our internships, these are, of course, single semester. These do need to be major related work experiences in order to be registered through our office. These can be full-time or part-time. This will appear on a student's transcript, and they register for audit hours depending on the number of work hours they do have per week. So if they are full-time, they could get up to 12 audit hours. If they are only doing an internship part-time, that can also be registered at a different audit hour level. And I'll talk a little bit later on in terms of the specific benefits, but just a little bit more information will be shared over the upcoming slides. We can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, co-ops and internships are embedded into the Georgia Tech culture, which takes time, especially if that's not something that's currently in place at your institution. I'll admit, I recently joined Georgia Tech in the past 2 months, and I previously worked at other University System of Georgia schools. And I was very curious about, why do I register this internship? Why do I, really push this co-op program? So I want to outline some of the specifics a little bit later in the presentation, but it was very enlightening coming into Georgia Tech and learning more. So for our total undergrad student body that participate in these programs, we have over 2,000, over 2,500 for our co-op degrees. We have 320 students. And I do want to point out that we pulled data from 2019 through 2020 because it was more indicative. I will share it was a very challenging past year, as I think it was for all of our schools and institutions. We did notice of the two, co-ops were impacted at the highest level. Internships, we had over 50% of our internships rescinded last summer, which I think is likely on par with many other institutions. So it was a very challenging summer last year. So the data I'm presenting is more indicative. For this upcoming year, we've seen it rebound, not quite to the same level as it was, in previous years. In particular, we've seen internships rebound the most. Co-ops have been more challenging, frankly. Mainly, the reason we believe this is likely the case is due to that 3-semester commitment. That's a longer commitment to a particular student. So with there being uncertainty in the market, we believe that's the case, why it's been a little bit slower as we kind of rebound back from that. So for the students that participated in these particular, in our total student body, over 75% of our students participate in co-ops and internships. And of those that are engaging in co-ops and internship, almost 50% of our students are able to convert those into full-time work opportunities after graduation. All right, so a couple of other pieces that I wanted to note. So nationally with Georgia Tech, if you know our brand, you think of engineering. Absolutely, that is our #1 source of co-op opportunities as well as internships. Our computing program is exploding, and we're seeing more students over time engaging in co-ops in addition to internships. But I also like to note that, again, this culture is starting to spread beyond these particular programs to even go into our Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts, into our Scheller College of Business. Internships, sure, certainly you would think of business students having internships, but you don't always necessarily think of students going through a co-op program. All right, so a couple top majors, none of these are probably too surprising. The majority are kind of computer science, engineering, from chemical, mechanical, industrial, electrical, all of that. Business is slowly but surely getting a little bit higher. For internships, it kind of runs the gamut, but again, pretty high on the computer science front. I've seen an increase in employers that are seeking computer science students for co-ops. So it will be interesting to see if that may change over time, to see more students engaging in that versus internships. But time will tell. But you can also see the breakdown of majors and who most engages with our internships. So here is a map of where all of our work locations are for our students and a breakdown by percentage. So just note that where the dots land on a particular state, no, that doesn't mean that almost 56% of our students work in South Georgia. It's just the state kind of comprised overall. So what we found over time, these degrees, the Georgia Tech degrees, have a lot of flexibility in terms of our internships. There is an interest in our students, certainly to work and live in Atlanta in the state of Georgia, but we're finding, there are quite a few. You'll notice California, for example, 13% of our students are located there. Largely our computer science students, those that are interested in Silicon Valley and other areas. And it's important to note that we also have international students who participate in international co-ops as well. here are just a couple of our top hiring companies. I will point out some of the companies that you see on our list for co-ops and internships naturally have kind of fallen off. I'll be interested to see if over the upcoming year or more, we start to see them rebound back. So for example, Delta, not a great year for the airline industry. We saw a pretty dramatic decrease there. We'll be interested to see now that the economy is opening back up, how that may increase. Time will really tell there. We can go to the next slide. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out. So as I mentioned, when I introduced myself, I worked at other university system of Georgia schools. I worked at University of Georgia. I worked at Georgia State University. I've also worked at Emory University in a private setting. So when I came to Georgia Tech, I believe at some of the other institutions now, some of these programs are in place that were not, or at least I was not involved with them in other University of System Georgia schools. I was wondering, why do I need to register an internship? What is the benefit of this? Why is this model in place? So a couple of things come to mind. So before students sign up to participate in an internship or a co-op and register that through the Georgia Tech Career Center, they have to go through training. They have to understand not only, how to go through the mechanics, how to go through an application, but they're being taught about the benefits of this. They're learning, why should I engage in an internship? What is the expectation around it? And support is provided to students who are going through the co-op and internship program. So there's a process in place where students will set up performance goals directly with employers and their supervisors. So we help to guide that activity. So that way, from the beginning of the experience, it's very clear what the student expectations are, the supervisor expectations and goals are. We also provide a midpoint check-in where all the students who have registered through our office will survey and ask about their experience, how the process is going so far. And we even offer, we have our career advisors on staff that can help you navigate some of those situations that you may encounter in the workplace that aren't topics that you would be covering in the classroom, for example. And at the end of the experience, we also provide guidance about performance evaluations, how employers can engage in those and providing feedback to students, but also we're collecting some pretty rich data back from the students. For example, asking about what are some skills that you've gained, through this particular experience. So one question that we ask is, list any special qualifications or skills, required for this assignment. So if it's particular courses, if it's, technical skill sets, all of this information can be very valuable in trying to make those particular connection points. Another benefit of registering through our office that I think is pretty critical is that the earnings that they, get through either the internship or co-op program, it will not impact their FAFSA status. So some of these internships and co-ops can be rather lucrative depending on the nature of the particular role, which can impact scholarships and other funding that students may have to complete their particular experience. Also, through the reflection process, and I meant to mention this earlier, one of our best practices, in my opinion, is we survey students, essentially give them an opportunity to reflect on their particular experience. And we use a lot of the NACE competencies, I believe that Krista mentioned earlier. So asking students to reflect on the teamwork skills that they've gained, on leadership skills that they've really taken away. And we've gotten some excellent feedback from students that they now kind of start to see these connections between what they've really been learning in the classroom and how that plays out in the workplace in a variety of different settings. Another thing to point, by registering through our office, students have the flexibility to, of course, engage in this and maintain that active student status. So students easily have the ability at Georgia Tech to essentially step away, work full-time in an internship, and then kind of come back, maintain that status without there being an issue. Of course, they'll work with their academic advisors to make sure it wouldn't potentially cause any sort of problems in terms of courses that need to sequence in a certain order. And as I mentioned earlier, there are advisors to help provide that support during work terms in a variety of different ways. So I think by engaging your career centers, providing that administrative support, I know for faculty, I think many times faculty are asked to do all the things for students in a variety of different capacities. So building that stronger relationship with Career Center, having someone provide that administrative support, that feedback, and creating that loop is very helpful. One other thing I want to point out before we move to the next slide is we've found over time the students that are engaging in co-ops in particular, and also our internships, earn higher average starting salaries. Co-ops even being, $5,000 more than their peers who have not actually engaged in this particular experience. Anecdotally, the students that we work with the most in the Career Center who are unable to find employment, they are some of the smartest, students that are out there, but they didn't engage in an internship. They didn't engage in a work experience. And it's really resulted in some quite brilliant students struggling for quite a while, which is why we're so appreciative of having strong relationships with our College of Computing, with our College of Engineering, and with our other schools and units across Georgia Tech, because this has really impacted students' lives in a variety of ways. They're making connections between what they're learning in the classroom and the applications. And it's also helping to provide as much security as you can, in the workplace. Nobody can necessarily predict when an economic downturn will occur, but having some of these experiences, you're increasing your likelihood that you won't struggle quite as much after graduation. So we can go to the next slide. A couple of reasons why we believe these are high impact, both internships as co-ops. As I mentioned, these help to really tie theory to practice. We've gotten, and I'll show a couple of quotes on the next slide, we've gotten excellent feedback from students over the years where they've talked about, now I understand why we were talking about this in the classroom. Now I understand how this relates, in this particular application. So it's been excellent in helping, I think, also increase appreciation for students and understanding now that they're able to kind of see it beyond just the textbook, beyond just a presentation. We've also seen, from the assessment and reflection, just a better command and control over their particular control and in their particular career and experiences. So some of these basic activities of meeting with their particular supervisor, understanding the goals and the outlined expectations for them, having that midpoint check-in, and having a performance review, and these evaluations, again, really set themselves up for success. This has resulted in, beyond the higher starting salaries that I mentioned, higher retention rates and even higher GPAs. Some may think, it's got to be pretty difficult doing a co-op or maintaining an internship while going through school, but we've actually found the opposite, that it provides the structure that's perhaps needed for some students, and it does contribute to higher GPA, likely because what they're learning on the job, they're understanding the concepts and are able to absorb more information from what they're learning in the classroom. This has also resulted in faster promotion opportunities and an easier transition from school to work. So on the next slide, I just want to highlight a couple of aspects of the quotes from our students. So towards the end of our first bubble in the top left-hand side, I think one thing that really stood out to me is that they were consistently challenged to put their classroom studies to work and to learn new skills that transferred directly into my studies. So sometimes you may think of it as what you're learning in the classroom, now you get into the setting, but sometimes it ties back the other way where, they gain this particular experience, and as they go on in their courses, it's far more meaningful because they understand, I'm not just studying for the sake of studying perhaps, but I understand how this is training me and developing me, not only with technical skill sets, but some other essential skill sets. Another quote I wanted to point out, this program has also allowed me to pinpoint which areas I enjoy most within industrial engineering. By getting into different settings and getting exposed, this has really helped to many of our students to understand and gain that career clarity. I think Georgia Tech, there's sometimes a misconception that just because I'm a mechanical engineer, I'm very targeted. I understand exactly what I'm going to do with my career. However, there are a lot of different settings, different industries, different areas in which you could apply this background or knowledge. So providing that space and opportunity for engaging in these experiences has increased clarity, appreciation for the program, and in my opinion, likely has longer term implications for giving. That's kind of an anecdotal thing that we're seeing in the Career Center. A lot of funding, endowments, other emphasis areas where we receive funding is usually around experiential learning. Just one or two quick things, and then I know I'm at the end of time. I really like the top right corner, the last sentence. So the co-op program has catalyzed both my professional and academic development, provided me with some amazing friends and connections, and I couldn't recommend it more. Last thing I want to point out. So in addition to being able for the particular experience, helping them financially get through school, get through the program, retention, they were able to gain another level of learning that helped me prepare for being able to obtain the engineering and training certification right after completing my undergrad. And it also provided me the tools to oversee major office projects from day one as a new hire. So thank you all for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer questions later on. And I believe it is going over to Mark.
Good morning. My name is David Newton, and I am joined today by my colleague, Mark Reeves, who is the Senior Associate Vice President for Auxiliary Services. I work in the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies at West Georgia, and we want to share with you a bit today about some work we've been doing at West Georgia across divisions, engaging both academic divisions and student support divisions on campus to improve the quality of student employment on campus. Next slide, Denise. So I want to begin by kind of placing for you how work-based learning fits into our kind of broader thinking about high impact practices on campus. In 2015, West Georgia started working on a kind of broad plan to expand and increase high impact practices on campus. We call it Leap West. And our goal was to kind of expand opportunities for this, that we would try to really work to frame high impact practices around the guidelines that AAC&U had developed. So we thought a lot about essential learning outcomes. We thought a lot about the principles of excellence. We really foreground thinking about equity and inclusion as we think about ways to kind of expand and scale high impact practices across campus. So you can see here that work-based learning opportunities would kind of fit into, you know, either kind of the middle ground of high impact practices, or maybe even serve as a kind of culminating experience for students in terms of their time here at West Georgia. Next slide. So in thinking about this, though, we've run into some kind of challenges and opportunities. So one real opportunity is that we, like most institutions, have internship courses, and we do have some internship opportunities even outside of courses for students. One of our HIPS implementation colleagues, faculty members, Allison Hollingsworth in the College of Business here at West Georgia, for example, does a lot of work with helping to kind of connect students in her college with internships, particularly at Southwire, which is a large copper wire manufacturing company here in Carrollton. But we recognize that there are limited options for many students, that these kinds of internships attached to courses, or even that are kind of co-curricular, extracurricular, are not available to all students. And so this is kind of a equity concern for us, that many students at West Georgia oftentimes experience situations where they don't have transportation to get to an internship, or there may be some other kinds of mitigating factors that would keep them from being able to do an internship with a company, corporation, off-site, away from the campus of West Georgia. So this was an equity concern for us as we were really thinking about how we could really give more students opportunities for work-based learning. Conversely, we have student employment on campus that is widely available for many students. But the challenge was that a lot of those employment opportunities were not available, really did not focus on career mentoring, or did not have a career focus in any kind of significant or meaningful way. Students were just simply there to do the work. that the unit needed. So we were thinking about that, and then we're also obviously thinking about high impact practices. And many of our high impact practices really do focus on courses and on faculty. But a lot of the conversations that we've been having at West Georgia is how do we expand engagement with high impact practices beyond academic departments, beyond colleges, beyond faculty, and more meaningfully engage our colleagues and other student support divisions in this work. And so that's where Mark and his units really come into play. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, sorry. So as we think about this with work-based learning, we kind of have identified really 3 simple goals. We want to, in thinking about student employment on campus, we want to provide students with opportunities to reflect upon and synthesize what they have learned and connect it to their professional goals. We want to develop purposeful mentoring and communication with students to support a growth mindset, particularly with their supervisors in their work-based setting. And then we also want to engage active learning that allows students to share what they have learned or connect what they have learned to real-world experiences or professional goals. In other words, opportunities, as some of our other colleagues today have said, to reflect upon what they've learned and understand how it connects to kind of their next steps in their professional development. So as we've kind of had these conversations on campus, one of the first early adopters of this and someone who is really kind of taking this to the next level for us is Mark Reeves. And I want to turn it over to him and to kind of share the story of what he and his colleagues in auxiliary services have done to really help us move this forward on campus. Mark.
Thank you very much, David. I want, first of all, let Krista and Laura know I have taken a lot of notes. This has been beneficial for me. I appreciate this forum, and there's a lot that I've already learned. Here at the University of West Georgia, our auxiliary services are self-operated, meaning we don't contract out to Barnes and Nobles and Aramarks and so forth to run our businesses. We did many years ago, but we've changed our strategy. The primary reasons that we're self-operated is around efficiencies and effectiveness. Efficiencies really are about cost. And as you know, auxiliary costs are really just that's something that's passed on to students. And so we've kind of cut the middleman out, and it's allowed us over these past few years to reduce our meal plan prices, our housing prices, and so forth. At the same time, the effectiveness is really about quality and the experience that our students, faculty, staff, alumni experience here on campus. And so those are the driving forces of what we're trying to do with the auxiliaries. In order to do this, we have to be able to measure. We don't have the corporate reports that come to us. And so we've built what we call a daily operations report. It's built around key performance indicators. Those key performance indicators come primarily from our customers, our students. And so we get feedback every day, and it's a work in progress. There's 38 of these operations, and so there's a lot of different softwares and so forth. But as we receive the feedback and analyze it, a couple of key pieces of information have surfaced. First of all, we hire a lot of students for short-term sprints. And so the bookstore may need some to get ready for fall rush, but then they don't need them, 2-3 months later. And those very same students may be applying again because dining needed them or another office needed them. And so their employment is very sporadic. And our students need this income. They need stability. The other piece of information that's really surfaced is we staff for peaks and we buy things for peaks. And a bookstore rush is only a couple weeks long, and football season's only a few weeks long, and all these different things, they last for short periods. And if you're always buying and trying to be resourced for those peaks, it's very expensive in the off-peak times, and it's also very difficult for our students. So the model has evolved. Now we have a full-time hourly workforce that is our core. And so when we are not in peaks and we kind of drop down to valleys, this core is there 12 months a year, even through summer camps and so forth. And that's across all of the auxiliaries, driver ranks, housing, dining, post office, all of them. What's allowed us to do this is having student employees and putting the students in these roles. It helps them, but it also helps us in being able to staff affordably, and so we don't pass too many expenses on to students. So if you go to the next slide, please. I've noticed over the years that most of our errors in the operations take place right at the customer experience area or right at the transactional area. And so when we're at a cash register or at the bus route pickup, or if a student has an issue in housing, or there's so many examples, that's typically where we make mistakes. That is where our newest supervisors and managers are employed. And that's also where our newest, or where the majority of our student assistants work. So I did a lot of interviewing with a lot of managers and supervisors. And what I determined was these people care every bit as much as anybody else. They're just not properly prepared. And that's something I own. And so they don't have the Aramark 6-week corporate workshop they get sent off to, or all the corporate. It's something we have to do here if we're going to get this right. And so that is what led to what we call the Lead West Academy. We kicked it off last year. It kicked off the week after we closed down for all remote work in March and April, but we stuck with it. And it's 20 different managers and supervisors from the auxiliaries that are new. Now, new to us means they may be a seasoned management person that's come from O'Charlie's or Marriott or a different school outside of USG, or they've moved up through the ranks and they're new in supervision. In both cases, learning the culture, learning the ropes, learning expectations over 3 or 4 years is just unacceptable. And then once they've learned it, they've moved up, and we've got a whole new round of them. So we wanted to head that off with this school. And so it's a 2-part school. If we could go to the next slide, please. The school is a year long. It was bi-monthly, and it was 4 hours a month, except for the initial month where we had a full week of 4-hour sessions. But we wanted to teach them the way things work here. Go to accounts payable, go to accounts receivable, go to HR, and bring those people to us as well and learn the system proactively instead of by hard knocks. And at the same time, we wanted to get them, every organization has its own leadership culture. And we had people from Target, we had people from Home Depot. They're all different. And so we wanted to do this in a way that they learn the university culture. And I talked with Stuart Rayfield about this. She was our interim president at the time, and I told her I was going to do it. She said, "Mark, I've got some resources that'll really help." And so we've had speakers from Kennesaw, we've had speakers from the university system, we've had presidents and so forth that have come in and just talked with these students, I shouldn't say managers and supervisors, about leadership, coaching, and so forth. And so it's been a great experience. Next slide, please. We also had a group project though, and this inaugural of Lead West Academy's group project was how do we onboard and successfully train and develop our student assistants? Because we had everything from no plan to elaborate plans, but they weren't consistent, and our student assistants were going from operation to operation, just trying to stay employed here on campus. We are 15 miles from Alabama, and when you cross over, there's not another big city or anything anywhere close. There's not a lot of career internship and co-op opportunities right here in the immediate area. But, these self-operated auxiliaries, they're multi-million-dollar operations. Our housing's anywhere from $15 to $20 million a year, and our dining 15 or 20. We have accountants, we have industrial engineers, we have HR specialists, we have all of those things that they could get in an internship. And so that's what this is built around. And what was developed by these students and supervisors and managers was a 30, 60, 90 training and professional development program. Now, the first 30 days is really all about protecting the risk of the university. Nobody says that, but that's what it is. How to lift and lower, how to drive a vehicle safely, how to handle a hazardous material or a ORMD, all those safety issues. We want to protect our employees, of course, but I'm sure there's a lot of risk mitigation involved as well. As we roll over to the next 30 days, though, we start talking about cross-training. And we have a large set of opportunities. And so you could be a greeter at our Performing Arts Center, and you could also go over and unload books and shelve and do inventory. You could be a dining host. You could clean it. There's so many things. But if we get you properly cross-trained, then we're able to sew employment together and not have you working sporadically. Well, this has been followed up with our ITS folks now that we have a time card that'll go from site to site as well. And so I can charge the time to those operations, which helps us with that operation report. The last 30 days is more about the employee's career objectives. And so we really want to know, we hired you as a dishwasher. You're doing a great job. You do it safely. You've learned how to cook. You've learned how to work our cash registers. But what is your goal? Where do you want to go with your higher education and so forth? And as they tell us, we have those opportunities. We have those opportunities. It is tough to find employees, especially strong and well-suited employees out here where we are. And so when they tell us, I'd love to be a training manager one day, I'd love to be a quality assurance manager, we have all those opportunities right here in the auxiliaries. And so then we start aligning them with those opportunities. And we have a lot of student assistants. Our very best marketing students, our marketing professionals are student assistants. They're just unbelievable. And our accounting and so forth. And so we move them across, we do that with them, and they start engaging, and they love it. And we've learned over time that a student that is learning here and employed here is so much more successful. And we do have numbers to back that up. A large part of that is academic support on our side, the services side, where, when I was a student, I couldn't make labs. I had to work. There was no Hope Scholarship back in the dark days. And so I ended up having to change majors simply because my professor wouldn't change the labs and my employer wouldn't let me off in the evenings. Well, we don't have to do that here. We understand those labs. We understand your courses change semester to semester. We understand there's group projects and final exams and midterms. There's no reason for us not to accommodate. And so that's what we are doing. As a matter of fact, we're taking it past accommodating. If you're struggling, we have gone through a whole session of training our supervisors and managers where resources are. And so you may work for us in our budget department and you're struggling with a biology class right now. Well, we know who to send you to, and we know how to make those connections, and that's working. It is really working, and it's helping us a lot. Next slide, please. And so we went through a year of that, and we finished in December. We had a graduation, and in January we had a new 30, 60, 90 program. And so we've implemented across the auxiliaries, and this is just for student assistants, but we hire hundreds of them. And retention is important to us. Retention means that this, as long as we're doing things right, that's a big, a big mark for success with your employees. If they keep coming back to work, it's a big deal. And our students getting all kinds of checks in the mail, but they're coming back to work. So retention, it also saves us a lot of money, and it gives us consistency in our offerings and our stability in our operations. It actually allows us to continuously improve instead of having to continuously reset. And so now the university wants to do this university-wide, because we do have a lot of, I don't have the first-hand knowledge, but supervisors or managers in academic affairs or student affairs or that were very good in their previous role, and all of a sudden they're supervising a lot of people. And those people may have been their peers, or you can't just move somebody into that role and expect them to be successful. And they have a lot of student assistants that work for them. And so we're broadening that. It's not going to be a year-long program, but we're not going to be bi-monthly either. So it's still going to be the same amount of time. We're just going to do it in 6-month stretches. We're going to start in May. We've already had more people that want to be in it than we have seats for. We're trying to stay at 20. But we have another one that's going to pick up in December and go through April. Now our project, the user guide for this 3060-90, we need to really make it a good user guide. So when you're a new supervisor and I tell you this is what we do 3060-90, I also can show you how we do that. And you can keep it with you and be successful. With this, we've had a lot of student assistants that want to become supervisors, not full-time supervisors, but while they're going to school. And so we want to build a model to successfully onboard, train, and progress these student assistants into supervisors, the ones that are interested. And we're working across campus. And so if I have a student that's very good in accounting, an accounting major, but I don't have so much opportunity, we have a huge accounting department. And we're partnering, we're finding these opportunities. I have 14 people that are going to work May through July over in our accounting, payroll, and purchasing areas that normally we'd have to just tell them we'll see them in August. But we're making that connection. They're going to have summer employment. We have 54 student workers that are not going to be unemployed this summer that are going to help us paint the residence halls. They're excited about it. They have summer work. They're going to help us do landscaping and all. And so we have a big organization right here at the university. We just have to look at it that way and partner that way and keep the student at the forefront of what we're doing here. Next slide, please. The last thing I want to talk about is we have what I'm sure everybody experiences it, the summer melt in enrollment. And that is where we get commitments all the way up to April and May. It may even come to orientation, but all of a sudden, a bigger school or a school closer to their house or one they more desire has accepted them. We never hear from them again. And so we start up, our numbers are down under what we had planned for. Well, I have the same type of situation in the auxiliaries. We go from very little on-campus traffic in the summer to the peak season in the fall. And so I need employees, and I can't find employees when they're not on campus. And so I'm working with admissions. Rather than them losing those students in July, why not let me hire them in April, May, and June, make a firm commitment to them, and maybe that'll become a switching barrier for them. Maybe knowing that not only do I get to learn at the University of West Georgia, but I've got a job waiting for me there. Maybe that will be a big incentive for them, and it's starting to get traction. We're starting to get people in the queue. We're getting commitments in place, and we're explaining the 3060-90 to them. They're excited about, I won't just be washing dishes. There's an opportunity for me to learn how to do this, head toward my professional goals in life. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Newton, let him finish out for the University of West Georgia.
Mark, thank you. And Denise, this is our last slide, so we'll wrap up here. And wrapping this up, I just wanted to say first, thank you to Mark. We have been really excited about this collaboration and really thinking about the way that we get more and more people on campus aware of high impact practices and the way that we engage our students. I also want to say that this same kind of work is going on other places on campus. For example, in academic affairs, our library has been really a kind of a leader in helping to do the same kind of work for students that are employed in the library. And again, they've kind of adapted a little bit different model, but still going on across campus, and we're working to kind of scale this to other places on campus. In closing, I just want to loop back around to the criteria for high quality HIPs that we've talked a lot about this spring with everyone who's been part of this HIPs implementation work. And what I've done is pull out 7 of those that I think really do kind of align with this kind of focus on student employment. And as you look at those, you can see the ways that those can kind of be aligned with really trying to think about how to make student employment high quality. The other thing we've done, and this is my last, my kind of last point, is a lot of this work in certain division on units on campus, we have worked it around the AAC&U value rubrics, particularly the one around integrative learning, because we found that one to be really helpful in helping us to kind of focus on how it is that we get students to critically reflect how the work that they're doing aligns with their future career and professional goals. So if any of you are interested in learning more about those value rubrics and kind of how they work and how they can be helpful, we'd certainly be glad to talk with you about that. Denise, that's all for us. I think now I need to turn it back over to Bruce to wrap us up.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Mark and Laura and Christopher. 3 outstanding presentations and very diverse, right? Coming at this issue of work-based learning from very different perspectives. I do want to shift to questions. So please, if you have an opportunity and have something you'd like to get a question answered, please drop that in the chat. Maybe really quickly, yeah, we can shift over to some questions. We have one already here. And this, I think, is focused at David and talking about the student employment work that you're doing. The comment is this alignment here with the student employment work seems to work really well for, say, communications majors or business majors. What about, maybe you could talk a little bit about the types of majors that are getting involved in this and how, the benefits that you've seen across maybe different types of programs of study that students are involved in.
Mark, I've got some I'd like to say, and then certainly can pass it on to you. One of the things that I would say as we've thought about this kind of work is, Mark mentioned, for example, as students working in landscaping, as students working in cafeterias, and you can imagine that for a lot of those students, they may not be going into the food industry, or they may not be going into landscaping. So the question is, well, how is that kind of work relevant or valuable or meaningful? But I think the way we've really tried to focus is helping students to kind of, think about what particular kinds of professional skills they're developing in doing that kind of work. So we focus on things like teamwork, on, the other kinds of things that we know are kind of valuable for students to be able to acquire and to be able to demonstrate to employers that they have experience with and know how to do. I'll give you one other really great example. Students that are working in a lot of these different settings are really learning a lot about diversity. They're learning about how to work with people from different backgrounds, from different kinds of perspectives. And so their work in these kinds of settings, even though it may not be directly related, that's a valuable kind of work skill to be able to have, but also to be able to articulate to an employer that you've had those kinds of experiences and to be able to explain it in a way that makes it meaningful and relevant for the employer. So I think instead of thinking about it specifically as this major aligns with this specific employment, we're thinking more broadly about the kinds of skills that every student needs to go into almost any kind of work setting. Mark.
Well, I will add that we do have in that 30, 60, 90, we do have a slate of what I guess basics that we want everybody to get. That's interviewing skills, that's teaching them how to prepare for the interview, how to dress, all of that. And we work closely with career services on that, but we do cover all that. As far as opportunities, though, we really haven't come across one yet that doesn't exist. It may not be right under our roof. It may not be purchasing or engineering or sales or marketing, but it does exist on campus. And so we do have and every time you talk to a department, they're looking for somebody that's interested in this. And so it's really a matter of us taking ownership and making those connections for them. And that's really, if they're studying it, there's typically an opportunity to learn it firsthand in an administrative role along the way.
Thanks, Mark. Laura, I mean, you spent a lot of time talking about this in your presentation as well, with maybe a more direct alignment to programs, but I wanted to offer Laura and Krista a chance to see if you had any thoughts about sort of this connection between the experiences students are having and the programs of study that they're in.
The one thing that I would like to add that I think is just a good best practice, kind of taking it down to day in and day out work, is I think presenting students at the very beginning how they'll be evaluated, and take it to a higher level, like what Mark and David mentioned, that you'll be evaluated on your ability to work in a team. You'll be evaluated on your communication skills. You'll be evaluated in your ability to do A, B, and C, and presenting that to them in the beginning and asking for them to do a self-evaluation before sitting down and comparing essentially the supervisor's evaluation of that individual. I think it sets up the experience to kind of elevate it. So as they're engaging in whatever the experience may be, no, it may not be directly tied to their major on the surface. However, there's a reason why in all of the, collegiate classes, you have to do teamwork, why you have to do a presentation, why you have to do a research paper. It's developing a muscle, but students don't always understand that muscle of writing, that muscle of communication directly translates outside of that. So that intentionality of discussing it and pointing it out, I think, is what's so critical, but is oftentimes missed in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, NACE has done so much research regarding the career readiness competencies, which it sounds like is what Mark and David are really focusing on in these on-campus employment opportunities. And those competencies are created based on what employers across the nation are looking for in their candidates. And so I think, student employment opportunities on campus or off campus through internships and co-ops, really honing in on what those skills are and how we at our own universities can help students build those skills prior to graduation.
Great.
I will add just real quick, the majority of our student workers, this is their first job. They have babysat, they have cut grass, but this is their first real, job for an organization. And the things that we just have forgotten, or they do not know. Nobody has taught them these things. And so the basics are very important before we move them forward to, it's really what Laura was saying. You got to get the basics in there too, and not take for granted that somebody taught them those things.
Great. Another set of questions here. I'll just start off. I'll just knock them off one at a time. The first is just getting clear about requirements. I mean, are any of these co-op or internship experiences required? And are particular programs requiring these types of experiences for graduation at any of your campus?
Yeah, I can kind of start. At KSU, a few of our programs do require internships or co-ops, specifically sociology, criminal justice, and sport management. And the GPA requirement varies across each academic department, but typically it is about a 2.5 threshold to participate in those opportunities. Also see, do you have an in-class component and what topics are covered? Yeah, so a lot of the in-class components of the internship are ensuring that the students are reflecting on what they're learning in those internship experiences, but also giving students the opportunity to present to their peers and talk with their peers about what they're learning and what types of work they're doing in their internships and co-ops. Our staff is about 18, but we are growing by the day, it feels like. So we do have a pretty large staff that can help support, faculty across the university in this.
Great. Thanks, Krista. Other Mark, David, Laura, any comments on any of those questions?
I will say for the question about requirements, similar to Krista, some departments and programs will require it. Some will not. In large part at Georgia Tech, it is not required for the majority of programs. However, students are opting into it because they're seeing the value of it. And again, we've been lucky that we have a long history and it's very much embedded into the culture of our institution, but that took a lot of time. And I think it comes down to peers talking and just seeing the actual value in it. I think it really enriches their particular college experience. And frankly, I almost feel bad for the students that do not engage in that process, because again, the students I'm working with right now that do not have something lined up do not have internships, or in certain cases, they only engaged in research, but they're not pursuing research roles. So it's all about that end goal. If you want to go into research, yes, you should 100%, really specialize and focus on that. But when you don't have any sort of experience in an employment setting, that raises a red flag to many employers. So it's important to just be aware of that, even in conversations with students. And, they're going to seek out mentors and advice in a variety of different ways. And they don't always come to the Career Center to get that. So in terms of, so minimum GPA requirements, some yes. So that's where I might redirect for specifics to my colleague, Andrea Krumsha, and her contact information is in the chat. And the in-class components, if it's required of the program, there are some additional places and structure curriculum in place. But for those that are registering an internship, registering a co-op through our office, it's more so the beginning performance goals, the check-in in the middle, and the evaluation at the end.
The only thing I
I'll
would
just,
add, Bruce, is that, one thing that Mark and his units have done, which I think is really brilliant and important, is for so long, in student employment at West Georgia, you as a student, you probably wouldn't even get an opportunity to get employed on campus until maybe you were a sophomore or a junior or senior, because they wanted you to have experience and all of it. And Mark's completely shift that paradigm. So now they're looking to really, prioritize students as they're entering and their first, to get them employed on campus as both, a support for students, but also as a retention goal and a recruitment goal. And so I think that's really smart. But it took some work to kind of get supervisors on campus in their hiring processes to kind of rethink that model. And that first year students are not prepared, or they need to just focus on their academic work. So that, I think, is a real important cultural change that that I think is going to be beneficial for our students.
so I just want to add that two of our card office student assistants, our ID office, moved on to work in the sociology department. Now, I don't know all of the details. I just know we put in a new green belt in our community. We put in a back program, and they were looking for students that could do research with them out in the field. They loved it. And then in criminology, we have 4 of our student assistants that have moved over to our police department. They're not answering phones, but they're doing research and work and classroom work. I'm not 100% familiar with how in-depth internships go, but I do know that we do have opportunities on campus, and those department heads, they were so thrilled to get those employees. It's like they won the lottery or something. These people are engaged, they're studying it, it's modern education, it's up to date technology-wise. They were thrilled about that.
Great, thanks, Mark. I want to go back and ask David to comment on this. I know, Laura, I mean, the challenge is, right, of wanting to be able to have this opportunity available to all students, knowing that it's really complicated and difficult to do so, the resources, or even just having the availability of opportunities available for all students. But David, I want you to comment about sort of, you mentioned very much equity being an objective and a goal and ensuring access and opportunity for the widest range of students. I mean, tell me more about how you've been able to build that sort of that goal and expectation at West Georgia, and how you're actually holding yourself accountable to it.
Well, I would say West Georgia benefited. We were one of the 6 institutions in the USG who participated in the Nash TS3 grant, which really started, I think, back in around 2018, 2019. And we really benefited from that. We had just gotten our kind of LEAP work on campus started. And so it quickly became a way for us. We really began to we learned a lot from that work, and talking with folks at the USG and with other institutions about equity and learning more about what it was, specifically in the context of HIPS. And so it really encouraged us to really go back and look at our planning and really try to put equity at the front instead of something that you think of at the very end, but to really let equity kind of drive the thinking that we've been doing. And so, for example, I think one of the best ways we see that, certainly I think we see it with work-based learning, but I work in first year seminar. One of the things that we've really done is really look at disaggregated data in our first year seminar around equity categories to kind of get a sense of how different groups are performing and what they're benefiting or receiving from work in first year seminar. So, and that kind of work, I think, is the kind of work we're continuing on as we develop other HIPs on campus. We really do want to look at that. The other example I'll give you, Bruce, is this. With global and diversity learning, we certainly have a wide variety of study abroad, study away courses for students, and we really try to work very hard to give students, financial support in doing that. But we know that a lot of students from equity categories oftentimes don't get to participate in study abroad, study away because of financial and other reasons. And so we've really begun to work really hard in thinking about other ways that we can give students opportunities beyond study abroad, study away to engage in diversity and global learning. And we actually have a committee, they actually attended an AAC&U training on diversity and global learning to help think through some of those kinds of issues. So we've really tried to expand that category, not just to study abroad, study away, but to really create attributes and manner for other courses and other experiences that will give students some of that opportunity and experience.
Laura and Krista, did
Bruce,
you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Could I have one? Well, I was just going to say the majority of our students are on financial aid, but when you get over into housing, 35% of our new freshmen do not have a car on campus. And the great majority of them, they're the first time in their family to go to college. And so we don't have a mass transit system. We don't have anything like that in Carrollton. And so it is a little, almost all of that number was one segment or demographic. And so even if we had great jobs 5 miles away, they have no access to them. And so by having employment on campus, it does help with the equity. It levels that a little bit more, and it gives them opportunities they wouldn't have had before.
That's a great point, Mark. Krista and Laura, did you have anything to say about that question?
Well, I wanted to add kind of a separate point that I meant to add a little bit earlier, and it's one of the reasons why I got hired to Georgia Tech, and I think it may be useful to others. I think it's easy to get stuck in our lane and focused on whatever our particular task is. When I joined Georgia Tech, my charge was to embed career throughout the fabric of the university. So I think it's important to think about important transition points for students and continually reminding students of the importance and of getting some sort of experience, whether it's internship, co-op, some of the part-time things we've talked about as well. So thinking about continually reminding it through things like our orientation sessions, any first year seminar that you may have, anything that you have control over, anything academic, curriculum based, that's very difficult to talk about, at least in the Career Center space. We never want to try to tread into the academic space. And I know, there's a lot going on in the classroom. There isn't always space for, talking about career in depth in certain capacities. But I think just simple things like that reinforcing of a concept is critical. I have heard from several students at Georgia Tech, even where we have a culture of, internship and co-op, inevitably there's some students that say and get towards graduation say, well, I never knew that I needed to get experience. Like, yeah, you do. So what we're doing is we're creating the Georgia Tech student success formula that will be in all of our presentations for the Career Center, because we believe in reinforcing concepts so nobody gets surprised by the time they get to the end of graduation.
Now, we had a team participate in the AAC&U HIPS, a very intensive conference. And so we, part of that conference was us creating data reports on what the makeup of the demographic makeup of our internship participation looks like. And so I think after that, we really just were able to dive in and really talk about the barriers to participation and the barriers to success that may be implemented that we haven't even realized yet. And so I think those conversations about equity are at the forefront. That's how on this next Course Redesign Institute, that's how we're kicking off the Institute, is talking about equity. So really we can kind of frame the rest of the conversations of, increasing engagement in internship opportunities, but from an equity lens.
We have time. I'm going to throw one more question out. And this is a little bit more in the weeds, so I apologize for that. But particularly for these non-course based experiences like student employment, or maybe in some cases internships, how are you documenting this and tracking information about student participation, evaluating participation, and things of that sort that obviously fall outside the typical banner course structure, tracking structure. But so tell me a little bit more about how you're tracking those experiences at your institution.
Well, I will say that the 30, 60, 90 program is a document that we hand to the student employee when they're hired, and the supervisor has that same document. And so we are doing the 30-day checkups on those, but we're also meeting weekly. I think Laura said, you have to be careful. You can get off task and you start counting how many boxes you're checking, and you're not investing in the student. And so this feedback and their boss or the next level up stepping in and doing follow-ups has helped us a lot, because that's how we learned that we had 2 or 3 that liked the tool, but they weren't very good at using it. And so all those people they were influencing were not gaining the value. But we have that. We put that in their HR file when they're done, and it's a basis for their performance evaluations and career development moving forward. We also track retention of our employees and so forth.
I would add, Bruce, that, as we begin work like all the other institutions across the system in inputting, attributes into Banner to track courses, we are in parallel going to be thinking about how it is that we track and document co-curricular and extracurricular experiences that are high impact practices, because we think we need to have kind of a full representation of that. And it's important for students to be able to see that, I think. When we've talked about the coding and attributes, what we've really been talking about is that's not just a kind of data collection for the USG or for us. It's really for students to be able to see, oh, this course or this experience is a high impact practice, so that they're making meaningful choices as they move along a pathway. So I really think of that work as kind of for the benefit of the students. And so I think thinking some more about, how we kind of do that and bring all of that together into one platform where students can have access to that and see it, and we can as well, is really, I think, the next important step that we'll be working on.
Great. Crystal, Laura, any comments on that?
The only other thing that I would add, and that's where I think it's building a little bit of a culture as well as incentives. Again, when I came into Georgia Tech, I was very confused. How did somebody register an internship? This, concept was very foreign to me. And really, I think what was shared with me made so much sense that, this won't go against, this won't impact you in terms of FAFSA and your ability to, gain scholarships. Check. Okay, that really resonates with students. But also by contributing their information, they're able to gain more insight into average starting salaries for particular internships. They also have the added incentive of career center staff that can help them navigate different situations that they may face in the workforce. We're providing a little bit of structure so they understand from the beginning of their experience what they need to do to be successful. So I think when you think a little bit about the incentivizing piece, people are more likely to opt into that. And I will say, systems-wise, from a career perspective, the 2 main systems that career centers are using for the most part are Simplicity and Handshake. Both have the ability to track some of these experiences and provide some of the structure that I'm talking about. And what Georgia Tech is doing for registering internships does not cost students anything. So that's, again, there's no barrier not to participate. It's more so communicating the benefit of sharing this information.
Great. Crystal, will give you last word on this if you have any comments.
Perfect. Yeah, probably pretty similar to Laura. We have students that participate in audit level internship and co-op courses. So we collect the data through those registrations, but also we send out evaluations at the end of each semester to those students, even the ones that aren't getting academic credit. So we collect the kind of data and their experience based off of those evaluations.
Well, hey, thank you, Mark, David, Krista, and Laura today for outstanding presentations and outstanding work that you're doing on each of your campuses for students. And I want to just, first of all, thank you for your commitment to students and doing this innovative work on their behalf. I also want to thank today LSG again for their commitment to this work and their assistance, particularly Denise Dumizi, Brian Etheridge, and David Newton, leaders across the system, really, in bringing these ideas forward to you, to each of their colleagues on campus and across campuses across the system. The work continues, so we'll be in touch, obviously, in terms of next steps as it relates to your role as HIPS implementation team members and getting these appendices in. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to myself and Robert for questions, comments, support, and assistance that you need. And so the work will be continuing, and we look forward to seeing what you come up with at each of your institutions in terms of next steps. And we're at time now, so I'm going to close there and thank everybody again for their commitment to this work and your ongoing efforts at each of your campuses to implement high impact practices. Have a great weekend, everybody.